Greetings. This is Philip Amerson again on the Be and Do podcast. It's part of the Belonging Exchange, and you can find out more about that by visiting our website. Part of this podcast series is to interview friends that I have and maybe some suggested potential friends that you want to send. You can do that just by sending a note on the website. Today, we're delighted to have Michael Mather. Mike is the pastor, the lead pastor at Boulder United Methodist Church, First United Methodist Church. I think it's out in Colorado, where they are trying to mimic us with snow. And Indiana, I think, is beating you on snow right now, but maybe not. Welcome, Mike. It's good to see you.
Always good to see you, Phil.
So, what's happening in Colorado?
What's happening in Colorado? Well, there really isn't much snow at all. But as you know, the thing that's different out here is that in Indiana, when I lived there, I'd get snow and it would be around for weeks.
Yep.
And here we get snow and then it burns off in a day.
Yep. Yeah.
And then we pile it and then it burns off and so on.
Well, we're recording this on your birthday,
Yes.
and you and I both are born in early January. So I want to thank you for my t shirt that you sent as a birthday gift, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
The t shirt reads, "Always be yourself unless you can be a penguin. Then always be a penguin." What do
Right.
you mean by that? I don't get it.
Well, that's been the story of our friendship together across the years, isn't it? You saying, I don't get this. And yet, the odd thing about that is it's almost always things I've learned from you.
Well, actually, for me, I do get it. And what I get is that life is sometimes absurd and we should treat it gently and with whimsy and joy. And certainly our
Indeed.
friendship has started started under the Naked Lady at Indiana University Memorial
That's
Auditorium.
right.
Yeah. Your dad had said I should get to know you, I think is how this started, or maybe we'd already met.
No, I actually think Dad mentioned to me that I should talk to Dick Hamilton. And I went to talk to Dick Hamilton, and he said, "Oh, you don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to Phil Amerson." And quickly washed his hands of me.
Dick was always the wise one. So those of you that don't know, there are statues in Indiana Memorial Union, Indiana, not the Memorial Union, in the auditorium. And I said to Mike, "Where should we meet?" Or maybe he said that to me, and we agreed we would meet next to the Naked Lady. And that was the beginning of our friendship. Were you in seminary at that time?
I'm pretty sure I was. Yes, I must have been. I
You
think.
must have gone to one of those West Coast liberal seminaries.
I went to a seminary on the East Coast that begins with D.
Duke?
No, 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 no. I went to Drew.
Another one of those four-letter schools.
That's right. That's right. Four-letter schools that begins with D. Yes.
Yeah. I I remember the joy of getting to know you and the fact that we discovered we were probably both open to being penguins if that's what it required.
That's right. And we were
And
both preachers' kids.
both preachers' kids, but our
Both.
fathers were both pastors in the old South Indiana annual conference.
That's right.
But our journey has been often together. I'm your senior by a few years.
Yeah.
Uh, But what I want our listeners to know is, and we'll talk about this on other episodes, is the way you have been able to continue to have new imagination and new eyes to see the options of ministry around. And we're even thinking about doing some writing together that talk about the romance of parish ministry. And you don't hear that very often.
No, no,
What?
no. And well, when you talk about the imagination that I may have had or been contiguous to in some ways across the time, I think, I remember being in my last year of seminary, and you were at Patchwork Central in Evansville, Indiana, and um, you had talked with me about you were doing a project through Patchwork Central and going to have what did you call them? Three people who would be um, something of the advocates of the word,
Yeah.
advocates of the word. And you had talked to me about maybe if you all could pull this project together, that I would be one of these with two other people who I didn't know at the time, named Biff Weidman and Jocelyn Thomas.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, and it seemed fairly quickly that that Patchwork, you all ended up with funding for it, but only funding for two people. And
So
I
who
and
got
I was
left out?
and I was going to be graduating from seminary, and I wrote to Bishop Hodap and said, I'm willing to come back to Indiana, but only if you send me to Evansville, Indiana, because I thought I could serve a church in Evansville, Indiana, and because again, you this idea of these advocates of the word, what would that look like? What would that be? And you were like, well, you all would make this up. You would learn, and you would teach us through this process of becoming these things. And it was like, well, that's pretty interesting. I had never thought that you could make up things, and you could make up things like that. But I should have gotten that from you already, because in the year before my second year of seminary, I came back in January, and I wanted to spend a little time further talking with you since the days of the Naked Lady in Bloomington. And you had a little time for me on this day. So the day before I was to meet you, you said, "Oh, I've got a funeral, so I only have a little bit of time." So I came and met
Mm.
with you for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. And then you sent me to this Bible study group to lead this Bible study with these women in, in the neighborhood around Patchwork Central. And oh my God, did I get an education. But again, I was like, wow, this is what ministry can look like. Is this, I mean, these folks weren't, for the most part, parts of any church. And
Yeah.
you gave me the scripture, which I think was from the Gospel of Mark, and it was Mark 10, and it was the passage was about, it shall not be with you as the Gentile as it is with the Gentiles, who have great men who lord it over them. Instead, whoever would be the greatest among you must be the servant of all.
Wow.
And so I think I'm there to lead this thing.
Big mistake. Big
And
mistake.
like I don't know what I'm doing there. And I get up and I start talking about this, and this woman raises her hand and she says, "Yeah, I get this." And I said, "Okay, great. Somebody here gets this." And she says, "Yeah." She said, I'm running for office in our for precinct chairperson in our community." And I think, wow, what I'm learning here, and this is great. And she said, I'm uh, I don't really know how to run for office. I just got out of a mental institution,
Yeah.
but the party in our neighborhood didn't have anybody, and they knocked on my door and asked me if I'd run, and I said sure. And I said, what do I have to do? And they said, I don't know. we haven't run anybody from this neighborhood for a long time. And she said, well, I see politicians standing outside is it the Great Scott, um, uh, the Great
Yeah.
Scott grocery store, and they have big buttons. If I could get a big button. And then they all got talking about presidential elections, and this is 1984. And these group of women who were almost all low income, low wealth from this community were saying, John Kennedy was kind of cute when he ran, but no matter who's been president in our lifetimes, it still takes us all day to get around town just to be able to keep our household together and to have a place to live.
Yeah.
And again, I found myself in this situation, and I'm like, so I guess I was saying, so this is what ministry
Wow.
is doing this and being this. So yeah,
So her name was Stella,
that's exactly right.
and we will talk more about Stella and why and that group in a future episode. Uh, so, Michael, if you'll be willing to record another one or two or 10 of these, we'll talk more about ministry. This is Philip Amerson